Good morning, class. Today we will be studying the story The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. In the last class, we already discussed about the author, and now let's move on to the story. I hope you've already read it. Let's move on to the story now. $1.87. That's what the story starts with. Okay, very, very interesting line to start the story with, because as soon as you read that first line, you'll be intrigued. What does this mean? Okay. Uh, but then we move on and we see that that was all, and 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved one and two at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butchers until one's cheeks burnt with silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealings implied. Okay, by that line we can understand that this person, we don't know who the person is yet, but the character in the story is not very well off. They don't have too much money. Okay, and they have saved this money, $1.87, very, very difficultly, and it was not saved at one go because 60 cents of it was in pennies. That means, it was loose change that was saved at different moments in time. Okay, saved one or two at a time. That means, whenever she could get, she saved one or two pennies, coins. Okay, pennies are coins at a time, by bargaining. Bulldozing means bargaining with the baker and the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher. So she used to keep bargaining so much, and this kind of bargaining also, it burned one's cheeks. That means, she felt very, very ashamed to be doing that. That means she's not used to be doing that, and now she has to because of some circumstances. Okay, but it burned her cheeks. That means she was ashamed of doing that, but she had no other choice. All right, three times Della counted it, so she kept counting it again and again to see if she had made a mistake in counting. But no, it was $1.87. There was nothing more than that. And the next day would be Christmas. All right, so now we've got a context now. There's this character called Della. She's counting the money that she has, and it's only $1.87, and she has saved it at by bargaining with different people at different points in time. All right, but she couldn't save more than that. It's still very less, so it's less than what she wants, and that's why she keeps counting it again and again. And the next day would be Christmas, so she needs this money for Christmas. All right, what she wants is will become clear later. There was clearly nothing to do but float down on the shabby little couch and howl. Look at the beautiful way in which the story is written. So there's nothing to be done now. She counted it three times and the money was same. Okay, so there's nothing else for her to do but to just plop down. That means she's lying down on the shabby little couch. So even the couch is called shabby. That means it's not in a good condition. Okay, and howl instead of crying, he's saying, and howl. Okay, so she started crying. So Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of snobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. Okay, so that's a philosophy of life that O. Henry is giving us. That life is made up of sobs. Sobs is, when do you sob? When you cry. And sniffles is also, when you're sad, you'll sniffle around. And smiles. But in life, even though it sobs, sniffles and smiles, it is sniffles that predominates. That means, you'll be sad most of the time in life. While the mistress of the home is generally gradually subsiding from first stage to the second. So from sobs, she's going on to the seconds. All right, take a look at the home. So now O. Henry is talking directly to us, the readers, and he's asking us to, okay, that mistress is there, the mistress of the home or the owner of the home is there crying. So while she is crying and recovering from that, why don't you take a look at the house? Okay, a furnished flat at $8 per week. It did not exactly beg a description, but it certainly had that word on the lookout for the mendicancy squad. Okay, so that means don't get scared by all these difficult words. All these words are very well explained in your glossary. All right, so what is said here is that the condition of the house was not very good. Okay, if you look at the house, you'll see that it is rented at $8 per week, but it is not in a very good condition. In the vestibule below was a letter box into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Okay, so there was downstairs, there was a letter box in which no letter would go. That means, no one sends them any letters, so they probably don't have any relatives. And there was an electric button, okay, for the bell of the house, but no mortal finger. That means no humans could push it to get a ring, so it was probably stuck. Also appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. Okay, so there was a card in front of the house that said Mr. James Dillingham Young. Okay, that was probably Della's husband's name. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during the former period of prosperity when its possessor was being $30 a week. Okay, so that is a very, very interesting thing. James Dillingham Young was his name. Okay, but sometimes the Dillingham was added to that particular board when excuse me, when there was a former period of posterity. Okay, posterity means prosperity. That means they were rich. Okay, at one particular point in time, because this James was being paid $30 a week. Okay, and that is when this middle name Dillingham was added to his name, because it sounds like a very fancy rich name, right? Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, now his income, that means he's not being paid $30 anymore, he's being paid only $20. Okay, they were thinking seriously of contracting to a more assuming and to more or modest and unassuming deed. So now that he's not making that much money, they were thinking of changing that name board and making it Mr. James D. Young. Okay, because then it won't sound so rich and posh, it would sound modest and unassuming. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim. Okay, so when he came home, his official name is James Dillingham Young, but whenever he came home upstairs to that apartment there, he was called Jim by his wife. Okay, and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della. Okay, so these are the two people that are the characters in the story, Jim and Della. Jim's actual name is Mr. James Dillingham Young, and his wife is called Della, which is all very good. Okay, he says. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with the powder rag. So she finished crying and she applied powder. Her makeup was probably gone, so she reapplied the powder on her face again. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a grey cat walking of grey friends in the grey backyard. Look at the times, number of times the